Good afternoon and welcome to About Health. I'm David B. Feldman, psychologist, professor, author, blogger, podcaster, and your host. Today, our topic is what it means to be mature in relationships. It's something we all deal with at one point or another, and often adds zest and meaning and sometimes complication to our lives. Relationships. Whether we're single, have a partner, married, or anywhere in between, having healthy relationships requires real work. It takes a lot of maturity to show up fully in our relationships and love in ways that are both profound and transformative. It's not just about finding someone, it's about being good together, understanding each other, and truly connecting. Ask yourself, what are the ingredients of a strong relationship? Our guest today argues that they include paying attention to each other, accepting one another's quirks, showing appreciation, being affectionate, and giving each other the space you need to flourish. On some level, this may sound obvious, or maybe even simple, but we all know that it's far from easy. So, how do we actually do all of this? How do we show up in our relationships in mature and balanced ways, deepen our connections, show that we care, and make sure that our relationships are as strong and meaningful as possible? These are just some of the questions we'll explore today. We'll also ask to what degree these same ingredients fit not only for romantic partnerships, but also for our friendships and even our family relationships. Joining me by phone today is Dr. David Richo, PhD. Dr. Richo is a psychotherapist, writer, and workshop leader who shares his time between Santa Barbara and San Francisco. Dr. Richo combines psychological and spiritual insights in his work, drawing on the wisdom of Jungian, poetic, and mythic perspectives. Publishing books covering topics including relationships, personal and spiritual growth, self-esteem, and love, among many others. His most popular book, which will be the topic of much of our conversation today, is How to Be an Adult in Relationships: The 5 Keys to Mindful Loving, which was recently revised and re-released in its 20th anniversary edition. Dr. David Richo, welcome to About Health.
Hi, Dave, and thanks for inviting me.
Well, it's my pleasure. I thought we could just start with the title of your book, Becoming an Adult in Relationships. Why choose the word adult here? Why not call it being healthy in relationships? What was special about making it about being an adult?
It seemed like that was a good word to use as opposed to mature. I was afraid that mature might also sound like, you're an old person, which I am. But adults sounds like something that we've all come to bodily. In other words, we have the body of an adult, but we might not yet have the attitudes and style of adult living. And by adult living, I mean that you would act in responsible ways, of course, and at the same time, you would have done enough work on yourself psychologically that you have come to a place in your life in which healthy relating is just happening automatically. And obviously there are times when any of us might fall down on that, but wanting to be present in a relationship as a full-on adult would be the same as I want to be present with all the gifts that have come to me as I have grown and matured in ways that make it possible for me to show love and have less ego getting in the way. And by ego, I mean that mindset that would make us have to be the center of attention or make us believe that we're all it and we don't need others. So, ironically, or maybe paradoxically, you show that you're an adult when you also are able to acknowledge your need for other people in your life who support your growth and toward whom you have such affection that you support theirs.
You know, this may be too general a question, but take it anywhere you'd like. Is adulthood in relationships a constant state, one that we achieve and then rest in? Or is it something that requires ongoing effort and maybe shifts over time as we change, as our partner changes, etc.?
Yeah, I would go with the second part of what you said, that there are constant shifts and that at times we find ourselves coming from a place that's needy, and that would be more like a child state. And in a healthy relationship, we would make room for that. It would be okay that sometimes we're not present in a fully adult way. And you're going to see me break down, and you're going to see me come across as somebody who is unable to make it through the day without help. It has to be okay that it's like that. And being an adult includes the whole spectrum from independence to dependence, and the interdependence obviously is what's in between and what we would hope for most of the time. But we don't want to imagine that we can be an adult every minute 24/7.
Yeah. In fact, you call relationships a journey. Actually, you use the phrase hero's journey, which is a pretty heady phrase. Uh, Can you explain what the hero's journey is, first of all, and why you say it has something to do with being in a relationship?
It seems as if the central motif of a human life is to start somewhere and move in a direction that you find appealing or important. And in that sense, it's the archetype of the heroic journey that we learn so much about from Joseph Campbell. It's basically you begin where you are and you face the struggles that come up as you move toward where you want to be. And along that path, you will have assisting forces who help you on your way. And you will also meet up with afflicting forces who seem to get in the way of your advance. And so you have to ask yourself, am I in the kind of relationship that assists me on the journey toward expressing my wholeness? Or am I in the kind of relationship that is afflicting me and I just can't get out of it because I can't let go of what isn't working? Or I believe that enduring a non-functioning, unhealthy relationship is my purpose rather than having as my purpose to move on toward happiness. And it's certainly a sad thing when we find ourselves in that boat of I just can't let go of what doesn't work. So I try in the book to show how to see the difference in all of what I've just described, and to continue on the path toward what will best activate and express my deepest needs and wishes. And these deepest needs are also the ones that we had at the beginning of our lives. They're the ones that I call the 5 basic needs that you already mentioned. And since they all start with the letter A, I call them the 5 A's throughout the book. Did you want me to say something about these 5 A's?
Sure. Yeah, we're going to spend some time really unpacking these each one at a time. But why don't you just start by talking about just maybe listing them out, bulleting them out, and then maybe saying just a sentence on each one.
Well, first of all, it's important to realize that we came into the world with many needs. And hopefully, when we looked up from our cradle, we saw people who wanted to help us fulfill these needs, who knew how to read these needs when we didn't have words to express them with, and who came through consistently in fulfilling them. Of all these many needs, I chose 5 specific ones to work on in the course that we all have to take on how to become an adult. And it begins with living in a world in which you can trust that other people will come through with these needs that I'm going to describe. Or if they show that they can't come through, that you would find other resources where the needs could be fulfilled. So for some of us, that would be like, maybe our parents didn't come through, but our grandparents did. So the 5 specific needs that I chose are, first of all, the need for attention, that your parent has to know when you need to be held, when you need to be fed, or when you need to be changed. Simple as that. Then you would also have to have the feeling that you are important and that you matter and that you're valued. And the word in Latin having to do with value and price gives us the word appreciation. So it's somebody who appreciates your value. Your parents appreciate your value, rather than we don't appreciate you as much because you're not a boy or you're not a girl or you're not whatever we thought you were supposed to be, or you're not as important as your brother or sister. Then as we started to show that we had a very specific personality, then we were projecting the need to be accepted just as we are, rather than as what our parents had thought we were supposed to be or insisted that we would be. And then all through this, we would want to have the physical holding that's so important to brain formation in the very early months of life. We were supposed to be held and petted and shown a lot of physical holding and touch, all in a non-sexual way.
Sure.
And that would be the need for affection. And then when we finally didn't need our parents to carry us across the room because we could crawl across the room and then walk across the room and then walk out of the room and then walk out of the house to go to school, we needed the fulfillment called allowing, where our parents allowed us to start being independent. So when you put those 5 together, attention, acceptance, appreciation, affection, and allowing, you are looking at 5 important needs that we came in with. And when you notice that these needs are being fulfilled by your parents, you also realize that you live in the kind of a world in which you can trust that needs can be fulfilled by the right people. Who are these right people? The ones who are able to read your needs, love you for having those needs, letting those needs be okay to have, and fulfilling them.
And if we're lucky, and if we play our cards right, those people can be our partners, our close relationships, our friends, right?
Yes, exactly. That these same 5 needs in the economy of nature turn out to be the very same, the ones that make for intimacy in adult relationships. So in childhood, you needed the needs fulfilled 24/7, but when you're an adult, and this is another feature of being an adult, you're satisfied with a moderate fulfillment of needs, not 24/7, but just as needed. And the way I put it is, in a healthy relationship, you're receiving the 5 A's most of the time in a good enough way. Most of the time, not all the time, in a good enough way, not a perfect way. And that also, the good enough way, also describes healthy parenting. It's good enough parenting, not perfect parenting.
Right. We can't be perfect.
Right. Nor can we expect others to be perfect in how they come across to us or how they try to be there for us.
Well, I'm David B. Feldman, and my guest today on About Health is Dr. David Richo, psychotherapist and author of more than 25 books, including How to Be an Adult in Relationships, The 5 Keys to Mindful Loving, which was recently revised and re-released in its 20th anniversary edition. And indeed, we're talking about how to cultivate loving and mature relationships. Because this is a pre-recorded interview, unfortunately, we're not able to take calls today. So, Dr. Richo, what I'd like to spend some time on now is really going back and talking about each of these A's of mindful loving. And the first one that you named was attention. So, what do you mean exactly by attention? And how does giving healthy attention in a relationship differ from being overly attentive or even smothering?
The word attention comes from 2 Latin words, ad and tentare. Tentare in Latin means to stretch. And the first part of the word, the AT, which originally was AD, means toward.
Oh, wow.
Attention means that someone has stretched out from himself, herself, themselves toward you in a focused and engaged way. It's somebody has been able to come out of himself, herself, themselves toward you with an engaged focus that is at the same time mindful when it's in the context of love. Because, for instance, somebody could come across it with an engaged focus and be scrutinizing you
Sure.
and looking for, how wrong you are or how bad you are, or judging you. So attentiveness as scrutiny is not part of love. The loving style of attentiveness is when the focus is mindful, it's without judgment, it's simply open to who you really are in a welcoming way. So that's the first need. And you can see that it would have to be 24/7 in infancy, but it certainly does not have to be 24/7 in adult living. In fact, if you did have somebody who was constantly focusing on you, if you were truly a healthy person, you would be bristling because you wouldn't want that much attention um, because you would like to be with somebody who is able to look elsewhere with you at the big world around you rather than just constantly be um, staring at you.
As you're talking about all of this and the importance of attention, I just keep thinking about the prevalence of technology in our lives. I feel like I ask all my guests this question, but how does technology influence our ability to give and receive attention? And I mean, like social media, emailing, texting, smartphones, all of this inundation of communication, and yet it seems like it puts a strain on our relationships. So, how does all this affect our ability to get and receive and give attention?
It seems like um, all the, um, shall we say, attention that has to do with the screen can can be a distraction from this kind of intimate connection that we're describing in our topic today. And so we would want to watch out that we don't put more and more of our intimate sharings in social media and on screens in such a way that we lose the face to face experience of it. So it's not as if there's something wrong with it, it's that it can't be the only way of doing it. And if it starts to become the only way of doing it, doing what? Of sharing what's really going on with us uh, within a relationship, then we're losing that wonderful bodily connection that relationship includes.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Well, you were talking about how, as a person is receiving attention, we crave attention, we want attention, not too much, the right amount, but that attention also needs to be accompanied by a kind of acceptance. And that really is your second A of mindful loving. And I have to say, I think that acceptance is so important. We all crave acceptance in our relationships. I know I do. Um, but people can also sometimes do really rotten things. So, how can we practice healthy acceptance of our partners in relationships without necessarily tolerating unhealthy or even abusive behavior?
It would be I accept you as you are, and there are times when the way you are becomes difficult for me to live with. So I would like to talk about that and come up with an agreement about how we could be with each other in acceptable ways. What are acceptable ways? Mutually respectful of each other and able to give each other feedback without being afraid to speak up or without being met with ego defenses. So, another feature of a relationship is the mutual acceptance that lets us give feedback to each other without the fear that it's going to be met with defensiveness and I won't be able to get it across because your ego can't handle any kind of comment that sounds like a criticism, even though it isn't. So I make the distinction between a judgment and assessment. When you judge someone, you're saying that person is wrong or bad. But when you assess what's happening in a relationship, you are not judging. You are giving, feedback, I guess is the best word, as to, what does it feel like to be with you when you're like this?
Hmm.
And it should be okay for us to be able to talk about that. Acceptance, by the way, comes from two Latin words which mean to take to. So attention is to stretch toward. Acceptance is to take toward yourself. I take what you are and I bring it into myself. I let it be okay that you are who you are. And the opposite of acceptance would be rejection or judgment.
Hmm.
So in a healthy relationship, I accept you just as you are, while also being allowed to tell you when the way you are scrapes a little bit against me. And so let's take a look at it.
What about the balance between accepting a partner for who they are, like you're saying, versus encouraging growth? And I think this probably has a lot to do with the distinction you're making between, judging and giving feedback. I mean, when I think about my relationship of 14 years, one of the things that I value most in my partner is that he has encouraged me to grow and change and become a better human being. Is there a balance to be struck here? And any suggestions for how to know where that balance is?
Balance between what you're actually like and what you could be.
Yeah, between accepting your partner and encouraging them to grow, or being accepted versus being encouraged to grow or change.
Yeah, that would be the allowing one. So it's accepting you as you are with your personality, quirks, and traits. And then as far as what you're now describing, I call that the allowing, which would be that it's okay with me that you live in accord with your deepest needs, values, and wishes rather than be controlled by me. So the opposite of allowing is controlling, opposite of accepting is rejecting.
Hmm.
So that's why they're different. And what you're bringing up now would be in the realm of you're with you want to be with somebody who lets it be okay that you have your own friends, your own hobbies, your own interests, your own values, your own way of moving in the world. And I'm beside you as you do all this, and I'm not interfering with it and demanding that you keep yourself small so that I'll feel comfortable with you. I love the fact that you're becoming more and that I'm seeing more and that I have more to be with. And it's encouraging me to be more too. So that's how the allowing and the accepting go together.
Got it. And that also reminds me of what you said before about the fact that being an adult or being mature in relationships is a process, right? Because it may be that we get used to our partners being a certain way and we're accepting and allowing of that, but then they change, right? They're human, they evolve, and it challenges us to keep going on that path of acceptance and allowing. I wonder if you have thoughts there.
Yeah, in other words, it's okay with you that you're with somebody who changes.
Hmm.
And of course, it's accepting the wonderful Buddhist principle of impermanence that nobody is going to be the same way all the time. And it's okay with me that you're now moving in this new direction as long as I can be included in how it's happening, where it's taking you, and how I might join you in whatever part of it is appealing to me.
Yeah.
And by the way, when each of these 5 A's, each of these 5 needs that are with us all our lives, which we need to fulfill for ourselves, not just from our partner. Like I'm supposed to give myself attention, give myself acceptance, give myself, and so forth. that um, when it goes both ways, when you give me the 5 and I give you the 5, that's called intimacy.
Hmm. Makes perfect sense. And you just said a second ago, it's about mutually giving it to each other, as you said, and that's intimacy. But you also said it's so important that we give it to ourselves. So,
Yes,
as we're talking about the ability to give attention and to allow our partners to be themselves and to accept them for who they are, where does self acceptance fit in here? It might sound kind of cliche, but I suspect it's true. Doesn't accepting others really begin, in some sense, by accepting ourselves?
absolutely. And self-acceptance is the opposite of self-deception, where I fool myself into thinking that I'm more than or less than I really am. So self-acceptance would be a beautiful form of humility in which I let it be okay that I have various and many limits and even shadow sides of myself that I'm not very pleased with, but I'm holding them all with acceptance and at the same time with um, with accepting the invitation to work on them so that I become a more effective lover, a more effective friend, a more effective human.
Well, I'm David B. Feldman, and today on About Health, my guest is Dr. David Richo, psychotherapist and author of more than 25 books, including How to Be an Adult in Relationships, The 5 Keys to Mindful Loving, which was recently revised and re-released in its 20th anniversary edition. And indeed, we are talking about these 5 keys or 5 A's to mindful loving from that book. Because this is a pre-recorded interview, unfortunately, we aren't able to take calls today. So, Dr. Richo, we've talked so far about 3 of your 5 A's: attention, acceptance, and allowing. Let's spend a little time with appreciation. Um, how can couples cultivate a habit of appreciating each other? And let me nuance that question a little bit by adding the pesky phrase, even when we get annoyed with one another.
One thing I suggest in the clients that I've worked with is to have a daily, like maybe at the end of the day, or if you go for a walk after dinner, you would talk about what you appreciate about your partner, especially whatever happened on that particular day. So appreciation is where you acknowledge the value of the other person in your life. And this value might get lost if you start taking one another for granted.
Sure.
But this little practice of at least 3 appreciations per day makes for a much healthier relationship and helps build the self-esteem of one another. And of course, you could also mention 3 resentments that you might have if those have come up, as you just mentioned, little annoying things that trigger you. And you will be able to say, okay, here's some things that I resent, and is there a way of working together on some of these things if you agree that it's something you'd like to work on, so that things go more smoothly? Because all of us are going to have resentments in any relationship. It just goes with the territory. But you don't want to let it fester. You want to bring it out in the open. And this is why I recommend, as part of appreciation and as part of any of the fulfillment of these needs, is a commitment to work on issues by addressing them rather than hiding them or running away from them or denying them, processing them by showing the feelings that go with whatever you've been triggered by, such as anger or grief, sadness, fear, and then working out an agreement so that things can be better in the future.
Yeah, I think present in that answer is a real wisdom that things don't have to be all or nothing, right? That what you're saying is we can really appreciate the value that our partner brings, the really good points of who they are, and at the same time find ways of saying, and here are some things that I think we can and maybe should work on together. That again, as you said before, uh, good relationships aren't necessarily perfect.
I think we've all noticed that.
Totally, totally true.
Shakespeare has a phrase that holds in perfection but a moment, and I use that a lot. That perfection is just momentary. Every once in a while, something's really perfect. Doesn't get much better than this, unquote. And so that's wonderful, and that's what we look for. An adult has realized I can't look for perfection, but I can have moments that have a kind of perfectness to them that I can really appreciate and bask in, and even look for ways to provide such perfect moments to my partner or partners.
Yeah, really beautiful words. So, any advice about the opposite? So, we've talked about expressing appreciation. What about for people who feel like at this moment in their relationship, they aren't getting enough appreciation from their partners? Any tips for how to go about asking for that?
In a truly open relationship, open in the sense that we're sharing at a deep level and in an uninhibited way, you would always be making room for, as we said before, giving each other feedback about what I call the state of the union.
Hmm.
And I do recommend this, just as the president gives a State of the Union message every once in a while. I think it's important in a relationship, I would say at least every couple of months, to have a State of the Union discussion. This is what the union with you feels like for me at this point. How does the relationship feel to you? It's kind of a check-in so that you're both on the same page as to what it feels like to be together. And it has to be done in a very kind way, but at the same time in a very honest, straightforward way. And especially we here in California, we're not as good as, let's say, somebody in Manhattan would be on telling it straight out. So you would have to learn how to do this if it isn't part of your ordinary speech spectrum. You would have to be able to say straight out, this doesn't feel good, that does feel good, there's no blame in this, I'm simply reporting what's happening in me, and I'm looking for a way to work something out with you so that we both could be satisfied.
Takes work, that's for sure. The next A, or rather the final A of your 5 A's of mindful loving, is affection. And it's interesting that we're getting to this one last in the show, because I think a lot of people would sort of stereotypically assume that it's all about affection. But I really love the fact that you say, no, this is an important part, but it's not the only thing that makes loving, mature relationships work. When I read this part of your book about affection, it occurred to me that people express affection in really different ways. And people often have really different desires about how their partners would express affection towards them. I know it's kind of a big question, but any thoughts about how couples can navigate these kinds of differences in their needs and desires for affection?
First of all, it would have to be totally okay that you would have affectionate times without it having to be sexual.
Hmm.
So by affection, I'm referring to the physicality in the relationship, the touching, the cuddling, the hugging, um, all of which um, deepens and expands the intimacy. This is why the sexual part of the relationship is also so important, because that's what the ongoing sexual connection does. It deepens and expands the intimacy. So couples or any of what I say, I hope also refers to polyamorous people, but the sexual part is not just about pleasure. It's about expanding and, as I say, deepening the extent to which you are feeling the love between you.
Hmm.
The acting it out physically, either through cuddling or holding in a non-sexual way or in sexuality, both are meant to both help you be closer. So by affection, in childhood, obviously it's non-sexual, and in adulthood, it's sexual to the extent that the relationship includes it. So, for instance, in a friendship, you might have no sexual part, but you do have hugging, arm around your shoulder, and so forth. Like when you and I met a few days ago, we hugged each other when we first
Sure.
saw each other because I feel genuine affection toward you, but I wanted to show it in a physical way, and so did you. But we respected each other's boundaries because, it just lasted for moments, and then we sat down and had our coffee together.
Does affection have to be physical? Or if it's not physical, would it fit under one of the other A's? So I'm thinking about, for instance, I grew up in a family where we used the word love a lot. Um, we really said, I love you. My parents said that to me. I said that to my parents. I tend to say that to my friends. Whereas other people are a little less comfortable using the love word, they might show love with a touch or with a squeeze on the shoulder or something like that. Can affection also be verbal, or does that really serve a different purpose?
No, I like what you're saying, and yes, of course, saying loving things is part of the affection. That's a very good point. It doesn't have to be just physical touch. It comes through in our vocabulary, in what we say to each other, not just pillow talk or not just during sex, but at any time.
Any tips for how to ask for affection? This seems like one of the more awkward things, right? Maybe you really love and appreciate someone, but for whatever reason, you feel like you're not getting enough affection or the type of affection and this again can be sexual or non-sexual, that really speaks to your soul. So any tips for how to ask for affection, particularly when it might be different from how our partner might naturally show it?
I think it's really important for uh, people in relationships to have a discussion about that, that what you just brought up, and all of these five A's. This is what feels like affection to me. If you can do this, I would really appreciate it. This is what feels like attention to me. If you do this, I really appreciate it, and so forth. Because each of us has his or her or their own language of the five A's. Just like there are love languages, there are also need fulfillment languages. So one person is fulfilled by just a wink of an eye across the room, and the other is only fulfilled when you come over and give a hug. So you would want to know each other at that level and be there for each other in the ways that work for you, work for one another. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Just reflecting on my 14-year relationship, as I said, I grew up saying I love you to people I care for. My partner didn't so much. And the family that he grew up in would express affection through behaviors uh, like washing the dishes for one another or giving each other the best piece of food on the table. And so my partner and I sometimes find ourselves missing the signals for affection or of affection that we send each other because we use those different languages. And we've really benefited at times from saying, oh, this was affection that I was giving you. Did you recognize it? And being able to say, can I get a little more of this kind of affection? Can I get a little more of that kind of affection? Or even a little less of this kind of affection, because that's not what speaks to my heart. Is that kind of
Mm.
what you're saying?
Oh, absolutely. You expressed it very well.
So we've spent the better part of this hour going through your five A's for mindful and mature loving. Mostly we've been referring to romantic relationships during our conversation, but it seems like these could potentially be important in any relationship with friends, parents, kids, family, really anybody. Are these principles broadly applicable to these other relationships as well? And are there any important differences to note here?
Well, first of all, yes, of course, they would apply anywhere. But I would especially put accent for another moment on giving these five to yourself,
Hmm.
because we also have not been very well trained in how to love ourselves. We might have been given the impression that love yourself is selfish rather than self-caring. And when you give yourself these five A's, you will first of all appreciate yourself more and grow in self-esteem, because you realize that you can trust yourself now to be there for yourself attentively, acceptantly, appreciatively, affectionately, and with full allowing. And at the same time, you will no longer feel as needy to get those five A's from other people.
Hmm. That makes sense, right? Because it's really not about these just being characteristics of a relationship. It's really that these are the things that we need to nourish our hearts, minds, and souls as human beings.
Exactly. And also what you said before, I mean, it certainly applies to friendships, um, and it certainly applies to spirituality also, because when you act with loving kindness in accord with, the Buddhist practice of loving kindness. It's really about more than simply wishing happiness and freedom from pain to others. It's also being present to them in these 5 ways. And that to me is a wonderfully fertile and rich way of showing one's loving kindness.
Yeah, if everyone was able to do this for everybody else, imagine how that would transform the world.
Yeah, and God knows we need transformation at this point.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Rico, we only have about 3 minutes left in our conversation today, and regular listeners will know that I often like to ask for a take-home message at the end of the show. So, looking back on all the things that we've talked about this hour, I wonder if there's one tip or one central message you'd like to leave listeners with. Maybe it's something people can start thinking about right now that could help improve their relationships.
For that, I would go back to my statement about how what we're looking for is not perfection, but good enough most of the time. Not all the time, but more than half the time. And not absolutely happening in every minute, but happening at moments, the receiving of these 5 A's. And the giving of these 5 A's is just as important in a life that makes love its central value. It's just as important to be giving it as to receiving it. So those are my 2 points. Good enough most of the time, and it has become just as important to me now to be able to give these 5 A's as to receive them.
Well, Dr. David Rico, thank you so much for spending time with us today. If people want to learn more about you or your work, how should they go about doing that?
Okay, I have my website, which is daverico.com. Rico is spelled R-I-C-H-O. So it's davericho.com. And there you will see my list of books and my talks, and I have YouTubes and so forth. So,
well, thank you so much again for joining us on About Health.
Well, thank you for giving me a chance to share what I love sharing. And this is my calling to do this. And I'm so glad you gave me the chance.
And my thanks to all of you, our listeners. You're the reason we do this, and I sincerely hope that this hour has been helpful to you. I'm David B. Feldman. If you'd like to find out more about me, you can visit my website, davidfeldmanphd.com, all one word. If you'd like to hear this week's episode again or listen to any of our past episodes, you can find them on kpfa.org. Just select About Health under the Programs page. And of course, I hope you'll continue to join us right here each week as we explore important issues impacting your health. From all of us here at About Health, may you be healthy, happy, and wise. Thanks for listening.
One of the things I love about my role here at KPFA is I get to hear directly from you, our listeners. My name is Italina, Donor Relations Manager here at the station, and I get to hear things like, thank you for being here for our community. And we get to be here thanks to loyal listeners like you. So help us continue to be here by making a meaningful donation today. And know there is more than one way to donate. You can make a qualified charitable distribution from an IRA, you can donate stocks, you can even add KPFA as a beneficiary. Thank you for being really thoughtful about this. Thank you to our monthly sustainers and to our generous one-time donors. Donate at kpfa.org or email members@kpfa.org if you have a question about donating in other ways, or if you'd like to increase your monthly donation. My name is Italina, here for Community Powered Radio, here for you.
The intelligence of KPFA is not artificial. It is real. It's created by talented people from our community and supported by our community. When you donate to KPFA, you are giving to our righteous idea of being community powered. Now, that's real. That's why we are here, as vigilant as always.
You're listening to 94.1 KPFA Berkeley, 89.3 KPFB Berkeley, and 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, 97.5 K248BR Santa Cruz, 94.3 K232FC in Monterey, and always online at kpfa.org.